Hey, good afternoon. All right. It's good to be here.
Good to be
here. My name is Ben Jealous. These days I teach public policy at Princeton 1 day a week, and I spend the rest of the week investing in downtown Baltimore.
Yes.
I'm an investor with Capeware Capital. We invest in double bottom line companies that change the world by growing rapidly. Our flagship company is co-founded by a Morgan State grad named Damian Drake. The company is called Pigeonly. It's cut the cost of calling home from prison by 80%. And this year, when I was running around, I was chaired Bernie Sanders' campaign here in the state. It's one of his national surrogates. I would proudly say that I was a capitalist campaigning for a socialist. But you know, that's the great thing about our party. Our party's a big tent party. Our party is a party with a great history and a great future. I want to ask each of us, and I gotta say, for a young Democrats meeting, I'm feeling like right about the median age in this room. It's good. It's good. It's clearly the meeting of the young at heart Democrats. That's a good thing. But you know, I started out as a 14-year-old precinct captain in 1988. Came in through the Jesse Jackson campaign. Supported Jesse Jackson for the same reason I supported Bernie this year, because I believed he was the best candidate when it came to fighting what Dr. King referred to as the three evils: racism, militarism, and greed. And if we're honest with ourselves about what makes us proud to be Democrats, it's usually a transformative leader like Barbara Mikulski or Bayard Rustin, Shirley Chisholm, or somebody who we just kind of refer to by their acronym, whether it's MLK or RFK or JFK or LBJ or FDR. We are a party that, when we are at our best, is fundamentally about ending discrimination in every form, protecting our environment, and ending poverty. I fell in love with the possibilities of our state back in 2012, 2013. And really, quite frankly, with the leadership of the youngest Democrats in this state. You know, that was a year when the civil rights community in the state was saying, this is the year to pass the DREAM Act. This is the year to pass marriage equality. This is the year to abolish the death penalty. This is the year to pass sensible gun safety reform. This is the year, while everybody else north and south of us, Pennsylvania and Virginia, were suppressing voting rights, this is the year for us to expand voting rights. And you know, some of the old heads, some of the folks who are used to just doing things the way that we do things, said, oh, please, not all at once. How is that going to work? Just pick one. And the youngest Democrats in the state said, explain that new math to me. I'm not sure how that adds up. I'm pretty sure how that subtracts, but I'm not sure how that adds up. And then all of a sudden we saw these signs across the state that said, pass marriage equality, pass the DREAM Act, end the death penalty. And when you saw those signs in yards, you said, yes, that's my party. That's what we're about. We're not the go slow party. We're not the divide party. We're not the your group needs to sit and wait because you're a minority party. Yes. No, we're the get it done party. We're the all for one party. We're the ones who have all of those great acronyms, all of those great leaders who said we can end poverty, we can end racism, we can do it all at once. That was a great moment. It was a great moment for civil rights in our state. That year I co-chaired the campaign to pass the DREAM Act, and we succeeded. I helped lead the campaign to abolish the death penalty. We succeeded. I dug in along with many other groups to help pass marriage equality, and we succeeded. The NAACP right here in Prince George's played a courageous and important role. And we also passed gun safety reform, and we also expanded voting rights at a time when all of our neighboring states were suppressing. That's us at our best. But you know, it's always been at least financially easier to imagine expanding voting rights than ending poverty. It doesn't cost anything. In fact, it makes the economy work better. We've got to get back to being the state that passes the $15 minimum wage, that eradicates debt as a prerequisite to getting a college degree. We don't need to be indenturing our greatest minds. We need to be liberating their opportunities to improve our world for the better, faster. And in order to do that, we've got to really, truly become the party of the people again. And that means as organizers, we have to be courageous in the way that a party who counts amongst its luminaries great organizers like Bayard Rustin is called to be courageous. And I've seen what that possibility looks like. You know, I was traveling with Bernie all over the country, and we had just come out of Chicago and Detroit, and all of a sudden, there I hear Bernie, and we touched down, and he said, "We've landed in the Ozarks." Now, I don't know how all the other black men in this room feel about the Ozarks. I mean, I've lived in Mississippi, and I've organized in a lot of places like Mississippi. And that's one version of Mississippi I had never been to and I wasn't eager to get to. But there we were in the Ozarks. We were at Southwest Missouri State University, very similar to Chicago a couple nights earlier. You know that city Trump got run out of. God bless Chicago. Trump got run out of. We had to turn away 7,000 people out the door in both places. The room was packed. And they said to me, former president of the NAACP, "Ben, you're going to introduce Bernie tonight." I said, "Have you all looked at that crowd?" Like the most diverse, the greatest amount of diversity in that crowd are the 20% of the men who are in deer hunting camouflage. Like, don't we have somebody else? I'm happy to speak, but introduce Bernie. Is there somebody else, better translator to this community? And they said, "Ben, really, we think you'd be the best. Why don't you go do it?" I said, "All right." So I go out there in the Ozarks, this place that if I had lived all my days and never got there, that would have been okay with me. And I give my speech. And the response is just as strong as what I got in Detroit and St. Louis and Chicago. And I'm a little dazed. And so I decided that night to just hang back and see Bernie's full speech. I had, because of some logistics in Chicago, been in the room for the whole speech. But generally, when you travel with Bernie, you know, when he goes to speak, you go plan the next day because you've heard the speech. In fact, everybody in the room has heard the speech. It's like when somebody starts playing like Freebird or something, like people just like yelling out lines of the speech. But tonight I wanted to see the speech because the response I got in the Ozarks was not what I was expecting any former president of the NAACP to get in the Ozarks. And I wanted to hear how they responded to each of the applause lines, and would it be the same as Chicago? And he talked about healthcare, same applause line. Talked about fighting heroin and addiction, not as a criminal justice strategy, but primarily as a health strategy. Great applause. $15 minimum wage, great applause. Ending college debt, great applause. And I was getting more nervous because I realized, oh, here comes the place in the speech where he calls the police to stop killing unarmed black men. And in the spring of 16, my head wasn't in a good place. I mean, I have spent parts of my career in investigating public corruption as a reporter in Mississippi, covering police departments that were killing young men across the state. I've covered suspicious hangings of young black men, but I've never had to watch as many videos, none of us have, as we had to watch last spring, and I was not in a good place. And if this crowd responded even incrementally more tepidly to that call, I would be bereft, I'd be demoralized, I wouldn't be prepared to go doing what you gotta do when you're in the midst of a campaign. And the seconds turned into minutes, and I was just waiting to hear that call. I couldn't hear anything else. And then Bernie made the call, and the response was just as loud And I looked for the guys in deer hunting camouflage because they were like a hunting group. They were all over on the left-hand side. And half of them were standing on their chairs with their fists in the air, hollering in response to Bernie's call for the police to stop killing unarmed black men. And there was nothing in my experience as a black man in this society whose cousin was killed 10 miles, was shot 10 miles from here because he was going to testify against drug dealers, whose cousin was killed in Colombia 6 months before I became president of the NAACP at noon because he insulted somebody at a gas station. Who's had to deal, quite frankly, with rough treatment from officers, white and black, in my life. There was nothing that prepared me to see a whole bunch of white men, a whole bunch of deer hunters on their seats with their fists in the air, hollering about the need for us to stop killing unarmed black men. And yet, it was such a beautiful sight. And I thought for a second, I said, why does this seem so odd? And then I remembered what it's like to be a Democrat. We do something very well with almost every group and very poorly just about one group. With almost every group, we go to that group and we let them know that we've been listening to them. Right? It's part of what we call identity politics. We make sure that if we're talking to Group X, we're talking about Group X's issues first, so they know that we've heard them. And it works well, if you're talking to me as a black man in this society and you act like racism doesn't exist, I'll just be kind of distracted through the whole conversation. And yet, what did Bernie do that night before he made that call? He made sure that those groups in that room knew that he had heard them. He talked about issues about restructuring our economy. You see, when you're a poor white male in America, the only thing we can really talk to you about is restructuring our economy. We're not talking about racism. If you're straight, we're not talking about homophobia. No, we're talking about making sure you can work again. You can put food on your table again. Yes. In the somewhat kind of 50s parlance, so you can be a man again. You want to, as George W. Bush was on his thing about getting people to promote marriage. William Julius Wilson, who helped train Barack Obama at Harvard University, was saying, you want to promote marriage, give them jobs. It correlates most highly with the likelihood that a young man will marry, that he has a job. So yes, it's easy to say you're the party of FDR and MLK and LBJ and Shirley Chisholm and Barbara Mikulski and just talk about civil rights. But if you know the legacy of those folks, the way my grandma does, who's 100 years old, whose office mate's intern was Barbara Mikulski when they were all social workers. No, if you really want to lay claim to that party, if you want to lead that party, if you want to build that party, then you have to be equally on fire about ending poverty in our state and in our country. And that means we have to have tough conversations. That means we have to ask the question, is it really worth it to keep on giving tax breaks to the wealthiest handful of families in our state if it means we can't afford universal pre-K for all of our children? Yes. You have to ask yourself, is it worth treating Walmart better than Texas does by letting them get away with shenanigans here and corporate loopholes on their taxes? If it means that we don't have enough money, God forbid, Obamacare is destroyed and we have to step up. We became Democrats because we believe in revolution. The way that the founders of this country believed in revolution, the way Martin Luther King believed in revolution, the way all those folks I talked about believed in revolution. And I grabbed Bernie at the end of that speech in the Ozarks. He was walking out, and the last thing you want to do with any politician who's just spoken for an hour to thousands of people is get in between them and a drink of water. But I grabbed Bernie and I said, did you hear that? Did you hear that all the applause lines were the same? Even your response, even the response when you called for the police to stop killing unarmed black men. Did you see those guys, those deer hunters up on their chairs with their fists in the air? And Bernie said, Ben, I'm glad you stayed to see that. That's the revolution in this revolution. That's the revolution in this revolution. That's the great possibility of this moment. We can sit here and let Donald Trump do the same old game that we've seen everywhere, from Germany to Selma, of inflaming groups against each other, pitting groups against each other, scapegoating this group this week and that group the next week, and this group thought they were going to get scapegoated this week, but he really scapegoated somebody else. But don't worry, he'll get to them next week. Or we can do what all those heroes that I've rattled off taught us to do, which is to dig down deep, to stretch beyond the stereotypes that pollute all of our minds, and reach right into the heart of our fellow American, and just recognize that we have way more in common than we have different. That when we sit on the same side of the table looking at the problems in front of us, we can find solutions pretty quickly rather than staying on the opposite sides of the table picking at each other. That's what King talked about in his letter from Birmingham jail when he was challenging his guard, saying, "What do you make? Oh, you should be fighting, you should be in the cell with me." That's what he was talking about when he was fighting on behalf of sanitation workers, saying that you could turn those jobs into a pathway to the American dream. So, my fellow young at heart Democrats, let's leave here today knowing that we have a great future for our party. We have a great future for our state. And all it requires is that each one of us in this moment of resistance step up and decide to be us at our best. Thank you and God bless.
We have time for one or two questions, and
If we're going to beat Larry Hogan,
Yes.
we need a candidate who excites people, who knows the issues. I think I just heard that candidate.
Thank you. We're focused on that very seriously, and you're absolutely right. Look, I mean, let's just have confidence as a party. Right? Let's be clear. Hogan won by 100,000 votes, and about 300,000 Democrats who showed up for O'Malley didn't show up for Brown.
That was sad.
You know, and let's not pretend that that was about race. That was not about race. That was about a campaign. That was about a campaign. We know how to run strong campaigns. If we simply be us at our best, we will beat Larry Hogan quite.
Yes, we will.
this is still going, but it's okay. So my name is, can you guys hear me? My name is Jeremiah Welch. I'm actually from Knoxville, Tennessee. I've only been up here for about a year, and it's kind of been like a culture shock, but it's not really a question. I just want to say that I absolutely appreciate you for everything that you've done. Being a first-generation college student, first grad, out of all my immediate family, and then all the grandchildren on both sides of my family, being LGBT youth, like after graduating, being seeing 8 years of Obama, seeing Trump, and then really looking at the country like, are we really going backwards? Like, you know, like really like that quick? Just hearing your speech really turned my perspective back around. And I just want to again appreciate you for everything you've done, for being so proactive, for being so passionate. I want to thank everybody here just for being, you know, here. But yeah, that's really just really made my day.
Thank you, brother. Thank you.
One last question. Do we have one last question? All right, Mr. Jones.
All right, thank you very much.